Welcome back, everybody, to the Marketing Rules podcast. And I am joined today by Dan Sodergren. Welcome, Dan. It's great to have you on board.
Hi.
We have tried to do this a few times now, and we've kind of like bounced back and forwards and finally got you on board. Dan, for people who aren't aware of your brilliant work, just give people a quick overview of your background and what you're currently doing.
Good Lord, and my brilliance. Thank you very much for saying it's brilliant. It's okay. I'm just, it's okay. I have the joy of doing several things because I'm quite old. People don't realise how old I am, which is always nice. But I'm pretty old. So I've had probably about 9 or 10 different companies, one of them being a marketing agency back in the day, then a marketing training company where I train people how to do social media and other stuff. And then I do bits on the BBC, which is nice, and on radio and podcasts because I'm called a futurist. I'm a tech expert and digital marketing expert. But I also have the joy of I run or helped co-found a small startup called Your Flock, which is an HR tech startup which helps people recruit people based on values, and it's doing pretty well. We just won an award. We're now one of the rising stars for Tech Nation. And in fact, this morning we've just found out we've got a new investor on board who's very high up in the world of AI. So it's very exciting time for Your Flock. Have a look at it at www.yourflock.co.uk. But today was really more talking about my obsession with and my knowledge of marketing over the last 20 or so years, let's say.
You see, you're giving away your age at that point, Dan. I tell you what we'll do. We will swing back to Flock a little bit later on, and we'll kind of give you a chance to just to tell us a little bit more about that towards the end of the podcast. But you're right. What I wanted to do was really just have a bit more of a kind of conversation and pick your brains really around kind of marketing kind of methodology, marketing process, a little bit around marketing tech. And I tell you what, let's start with something that is close to my heart and something that we've kind of discussed, I think, already, which is kind of like the kind of old school marketing compares new school marketing, and how this circular motion is now coming back into the kind of into making its kind of reemergence of kind of this slightly kind of older school marketing kind of processes into kind of like a post kind of COVID world.
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, I know it's a funny old world, isn't it, to say, because I have the joy of being old. So I can remember when people used to say this to me, and I say, "Oh, shut up, old man! Don't be silly. Everything's new and everything's different, and you don't know how new it is." And they'd go, "Oh no, it's all based on principles, and it all comes in waves, and every 14 years." Lovely chap. He's no longer with us. He started with the Hacienda and other things, and in Manchester, and he's a wonderful chap. He used to talk about the fact that everything goes in waves, and it's about 12 to 14 year cycle for stuff. And actually, there's a different cycle to fashion than there is to music. And it's fascinating because he's a chap called Anthony Wilson, and I argued against him vehemently on very many a drunken occasion, for no other reason by the fact that I just thought I was right and he was wrong. Of course, he was completely right. Everything does go in waves, and they are different waves. And so yes, if you have the joy of being particularly old, you can look back at these moments and go, you remember this. I remember
it only comes with age, doesn't it, Dan? Though that's the only thing. Youth doesn't know these. Youth hasn't experienced any of these waves, and you've got to have a bit of time under your belt to have gone through several of these waves, and then you can kind of and you're right. I mean, we will get onto the kind of the marketing piece, but you're right. It happens with fashion. It happens with music. Happens with thinking within business. It happens kind of with everything, and it's interesting.
With everything,
I'd never considered it that these waves are out of sync. I'd never kind of thought about it because you always thought that they were always kind of, it's just basically this is just what happened in the 80s. But no, that's a fashion from here and the music from here. And it always obviously it changes and stuff. But I've never thought about it. But back to marketing and the marketing waves.
Well, I mean, from marketing waves, absolutely. But but as you say, if you look underneath it, it's everything in life, and actually, it has everything. You could argue everything's marketing. Marketing is everything. So it is important though to understand these trends that go underneath stuff, because then you can do marketing better. So we are going to go through a trend that's going to be coming up very soon, which is going to be around values, the value proposition in marketing, and about values being more important. And we're going to move from this kind of product-centric way of doing stuff, then customer-centric, into value-centric. And that's the new world where we go. But actually, it's an old world. It's not new. It's not, back in the day, people did this before, and we're going to do it again. But this is the new values way of looking at stuff. And that's going to be really important for certainly post-COVID. Now, and I won't get too much into the thing, but if 100 years ago, we had the flu epidemic, then we had the roaring 20s. It's likely that same thing might happen again. There's going to be a massive period of social change, and it's going to be driven by values, and it's going to be driven by deeper things around purpose and points of life and why are we here and those things. Now, that's not the same consumerism of before. So our marketing's got to change. It can't just be you're selling this because it's cool and fear of missing out and that stuff, because that's going to disappear. And collaborative marketing is going to be much bigger than competition marketing. That's the fashion now. I believe anyway, and I can see it coming. And I say only because I've thought about these wave propositions. You kind of look back at stuff and go, oh yeah, all that, like guerrilla marketing was out of fashion for a long time. A, because it's based on warfare terminology, which is not good. But B, because people just like, oh no, we'll do something else. But that will be the new way of marketing. We will not be able to do, massive smashing campaigns where we just, where we do brand advertising. That isn't going to work. And it hasn't worked for a very long time. So to answer the question, old school marketing, yeah, things like guerrilla marketing and those kind of scientific based things and some other clever psychological things, that will come back into fashion more and more. And I think startups have been doing this for a very long time. It's just, I think large brands, certainly in certain sectors, and I'm going to be careful with my words here, have been relying on the power of the mechanism of the day, i.e. for us, it's social media and Facebook and those things, isn't it? Back in the day, it was newspapers and radio ads. Well, that same en masse, blanket campaign stuff, we're just doing it on Facebook, really. Yeah. It's just the same shouting that you're doing. It's just you're shouting through a different megaphone.
So picking up on that kind of value proposition, give us an example of that. What does that look like? From a small kind of business, most of the people who listen to this are in SME sized businesses. How does that what does that kind of look like?
Well, I think you've got to be much more aware of, and you've got to listen to your customer a lot more, than perhaps we're used to. We're used to talking at our customers and maybe not involving them in the process. Like we're the marketing people, we market to them, and they're lucky with what they get. And we've got to move away from that massively, because if you don't know the values of your customer, the values, i.e., not the behaviors, not the culture, but the values. What do they stand for? What do they, what will they die by? What is important to them, intrinsically important to them as human beings? And it's not based on demographic, it's based on, psychographic. If you don't really know that, best thing, you just got to ask. That's literally it. We've got to get rid of the ego in marketing, and we've got to become a lot more humble. And you've got to ask them. And if you're on a call and you're thinking, well, as a small business, we don't really know the values of our customers. Yeah, that's your job for 2021. Get to know them, ask them those questions, sit down with them face to face. Now, I work in the tech startup world, and we do customer interviews all the time, just to get to know people, because also we product market fit and all sorts of weird wonderful things. But, we're at a stage of being a startup. But that same principle has to be brought into bigger marketing. So it isn't just focus groups where you're saying, do you like this ad? Do you like this color? Did you click on it? Oh, we looked at people and 12 people clicked on it. Great, 14 people clicked on it, therefore this one wins. It's deeper than that. It's literally getting to know your customers again and being a touch base where you can have proper community conversations. I know it might sound a bit hippie, but that's the reality. This community collaborative feel around everything, that will be driving those successful brands later on. And the big brands already do it, I think.
And so, with so the question, I think that with the pushback question on that might be, how do you do that at scale? You know what I mean? So there are some businesses that we work with, all right, who've got lots and lots of clients, great clients that they work with. So actually kind of getting that kind of feedback across all of those kind of clients, and especially as businesses start to scale up from maybe being kind of 10, 20 to 100 people within their business, it then becomes a very difficult job to process all of that. How do you do that on a much more human level without going down the technology route?
I think what you just said there is perfect as well, because you used the word human. Yeah, and that's it. It's just resources. You only got three things in life. You've got time, money, and energy. That's all you've got. Yeah, and people argue against it, but energy, matter is just, this pen is just energy condensed to cellular vibration. It's just, don't get me wrong, you can go into metaphysics of it. No point, right? Just take it as given. Money, time, and energy. Yeah? So where are you putting your resources? Where are you putting your cash? And if you're putting your money and your resources into broadcast marketing, take some of that into market research and customer satisfaction. That's the most important bit. Yeah, retaining our clients now in the next post-COVID world, as the old saying, get 7 to 14 times more to get a new customer than to keep an old one. Now, so if you're not putting a lot of your resources into keeping your customers happy, that's a big mistake. So as you're scaling up, you have to have a customer satisfaction person. You have to have, not only do you have to have an employee happiness person, you have to have a customer happiness person. Now, this might sound a bit odd to some people. Oh, that's not a job. No, it is. You just haven't allocated the resources yet, if that makes sense, James. Mm-hmm. It's that bit. It's quite simple. Your people are the company, and you've got to have more people in the right places as the company evolves. And you really can't. It's almost everyone's job to be talking to the customer and to be getting to know them and knowing their values. But you want to have someone who's a figurehead for that, whose information stays in their brain and stays on their computer, and not always in the cloud, of course, as Google broke this morning. So you've got to be a bit careful of that.
So is this kind of, again, is this an anti-marketing tech kind of stance that you kind of take here? I mean, is this kind of that you can't do this with tech?
Did you say anti-marketing tech? I love that. I love the, as a tech and digital marketing expert, am I going anti my own proposition? Yeah. Yes, I am, just for the controversy. No, yes and no. And I was talking to Jeremy Blaine about this the other day. He's a lovely chap, does stuff with leaders, loads of leaders, and he brought out a book called The Inner CEO. And the reason why I mention it is because he has a very human-centric viewpoint, and I follow him on this. Technology cannot answer all the questions. Yeah, it cannot. And if it could, it would, and we'd all be out of a job. Now, don't get me wrong, if we start talking about AI and other things, that's a much bigger proposition, and I believe AI may well replace lots of jobs. I don't fear that at all. And it's a statement that I made a couple of years ago, and I stand by it. In fact, I said on the 2015, I said this. What did I say? I love quoting myself because it's just fun. I brought a little graphic on it. No, is it? So in the world, either with the right people and the right technology, you can take over the world. But with the wrong people and the wrong technology, that world takes over you. Yeah, and I was 2015. I was particularly proud of that, and I still am. Now the point is it's both, isn't it? It's technology and people. Technology cannot have all the answers. It doesn't in marketing. It has some amazing answers, and it will augment the right creatives and the right thinking. But if your people aren't correct, then none of it's going to work. And we can't try to abrogate our responsibility in business by simply saying, oh, the computers will do it. Because if we do that now, the computers will do it, but then we'll never get it back again. And I think there's a huge danger in letting algorithms and AI take over marketing too much. In fact, take over everything too much, but certainly take over marketing, because in the end, you don't market to computers, you market to human beings.
So would you advocate this approach when you kind of let's move back down the scale to your very small startup? How does this fit into that scale when you're very lean and all you're trying to bring in new customers, you're trying to sell, you're trying to bring in money because you've got to be profitable so you can get your investment, so you can scale. Yeah. So can you do this at that scale? Because you're probably not going to be able to have a devoted resource for this at that point.
Yeah, no, but that's the point. I mean, that's the thing. It's the CEO's job. It's your VP of sales jobs. It's everyone's job, actually. Technically, even your coding people should all be doing it. Everyone should be talking to customers all the time, as much as they possibly can. Now, this comes into other things like your values and the culture of the company, and you might not be customer focused, but I can honestly say that if you're not customer focused, quite soon in the world, you won't exist. Yeah, because 2021 and the roaring 20s are going to go so quickly. The pace of change now, by the way, is the slowest it's ever going to go. I think that's a lovely statement that someone made the other day. I think it's brilliant. It's absolutely right. This is the slowest it's ever going to go. Yeah, and if you're not agile, and if you're not listening, and if you're not paying attention to your customers' needs, especially in the B2B environment, by the way, because B2C is slightly different. B2B, you simply won't exist. You won't exist.
Well, that's it. So that brings me into talking about a little bit about HR and recruitment. Okay, because you will know as well as I do that the recruitment space has an odd blend of B2B and B2C. Okay, yeah. Because you've got your candidates and you've got your clients, and technically you could also have your peers and your internal kind of hiring policy, all other things kind of going on. You've got quite a few balls to juggle and lots of audiences to contact. How does this methodology work then? I mean, are you advocating in that sense? Fine, you can catch up with your clients because you're always going to have less clients. But if you've got 2,000, 3,000, 10,000 candidates on your database potentially, now you're not going to be working with all of them unless you're Hayes or one of the bigger businesses out there. But how do you then move that kind of customer centric into dealing with candidates?
Well, yeah, and this is exactly why, I mean, this is part of the reason why Flock exists, in fact, but this is exactly where technology can help. You know, if you're still going, if you've got 10,000 shirts and you're taking them all day down to the river and doing it by hand, you're not a laundrette. You know, I mean, let's not mess about. This is, you know, the point of technology is to allow you to gain an advantage at that moment. So your laundrette is better than taking it down to the river and washing it by hand. Now, the person who takes it down to the river, washes it by hand, they might do a much better job. But actually, the marketplace doesn't need that kind of level of service. Well, some people might do. There might be a premium user who loves that. Very eco, better. Well, that costs you 20 quid to do your shirt. Awesome. This is where the market starts to stratify and bring itself out. But one of the biggest issues I think there is at the moment in recruitment and in HR is the number of people that are going for jobs and wanting jobs, and getting the best people in front of your client, because that's your job. Yeah. Now you need to have a technology stack, and I'm not, you know, this is the bit I get told off about, but it's absolutely right. Your Flock is part of a technology stack. It is not the technology. There's no way you can use one piece of technology. You have to have a collaborative approach with several pieces of technology. And by the way, your difference as a recruiter and a recruitment company will be the technology stack you choose. That'll be your point of difference. Your point of difference will literally be, well, we use this kind of washing machine, we use that kind of washing machine, we use that kind of dryer, because that's how you become a good, I don't know why I've gone for laundrette metaphor, it doesn't work at all. But I don't know. I washed my shirt. I didn't wash it in the river, but there we go. That's a different thing. It's because I'm looking at a canal at the same time. Maybe that's the reason why. But anyway, your technology stack will be your blueprint, will be your fingerprint, will be the thing that actually is your thing. Now, a lot of recruiter guys don't like this idea, or women don't like the idea of this, and it's because they think they're the special sauce. But actually, it's going to be the technology you use. So if you're not using technology to help with your social media marketing, and I'm sure everyone uses stuff on LinkedIn, but you've got to realize some are good, some are bad, some are not finessed, some are very bad. So you'll use it for setting up of meetings and AI systems to do it. Again, some are good, some are bad. You know, in marketing, there are now, I think the martech, the last martech version, I think it was something like 7,914, I think, different SaaS companies that work in that market, in the marketplace, of helping you with your marketing. 7,000, yeah. Back in the day when I was younger, it's like 1,000 when we first started, and I had a few companies trying to kind of battle in that space. 7,000 or 8,000 now. So you've got so much to choose from, and it's how and what you choose is almost more important than how you use it. And that's why actually your Flock exists, because your Flock will give you the chance to send out a survey to lots of different people and see if their values align with your clients' values, and then they are the people you should pick out of the 1,000. Do all these other tests as well, but the Flock test, that will be one of kind of getting well, wheat and chaff kind of thing. I hate that metaphor as well, but heck, I'm going to use it. So that's the reason why we've got technology.
So, in that sense, if we're talking about tech stacks and marketing tech stacks in particular, then let's kind of equate that back to the small, medium, and the larger companies. And your tech stack is going to obviously, and if we cater it to recruitment, depending on who and where and what you're recruiting for, your tech stack will be slightly different, because there's going to be a slightly more kind of niched approach. And I assume that you are considering that would your tech stack then be changing over time as you get larger and larger and larger, or is that so fundamental to the kind of core of your business that you just replicate that just on a kind of macro level every time you open a new office or you bring in a new consultant? How do you see that kind of working?
Yeah, and that really depends on the technology provider you've chosen. You know, do they offer both services? Can it go down? Can it go back up again? And of course, you'd hope that as a SaaS company, that's exactly what they could do. You know, so I'm not going to get too deeply into CRMs and how do they integrate with your back end and ATSs and all that kind of stuff. But we all know what we're talking about there. There'll be some that you maybe start off with, and I might feel I could mention the names, but things like Zoho and other things that you might start off with as a CRM system. Let's keep it simple. And then there might be other ones that are great. And I think it's called, I used to use it years ago. Is it called Nimble? There's one that integrates much better into social before Zapier and other things existed, and Clearbait and other things. So I think it was called Nimble, and that used to integrate better into the back end for social than the other ones did at that time. So it depends where you're wanting to put yourself. And I say I'd love to have those conversations with other people on the call if they'd like to have those conversations. Happy to, but that's what you need. You need to have a tech marketing person who knows those tools and picks them out for you. And if that isn't someone inside your inner circle or inside your flock, so to speak, you know, then you have to go to the marketplace, because it's a lot more complicated than people think. And I wouldn't just go to Grid 2 or whatever it's called, G2, and just pick out which one it considers to be the winner, because again, that's a device that
I would
is run by other people.
You know, running a recruitment marketing business, I would suggest that you kind of like just discuss it with your local recruitment marketing business who might well know about these kinds of kind of tech stacks and things like that. If you want
if
the
only
best
there
fit
was
for
the
money.
expert who could
Exactly. If only there was some people who knew about this kind of shit. But I mean, I suppose what do you? And I know it's different per business, but where do you side, right? Because I've had conversations recently with kind of employer branders and all kinds of kind of people within marketing. We do this every so lot, and there's a couple of different camps around this. So do you want to do it kind of very small and individual with regards to teams? Do we want to do it on a brand basis? My feeling is that, and I've been convinced over this, is that kind of team branding and building out kind of stacks almost around teams is kind of a really kind of good is a way to look at it. Possibly a bit more expensive, but it makes you just kind of a bit more kind of very, very, very detailed, very nimble, and very niche, even within that team. And that can be obviously that's their tech stack, that's their marketing stack, that's everything that kind of goes into that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, absolutely. Absolutely everything you've just said is exactly the way forward. The way forward is to look at a company like what it really is, which is a series of small teams. And if the teams get too big, then the dynamics change anyway. But everyone amalgamates together. And with your marketing, it's much more me to me than B2B and B2C or B2G. And this is the thing that I think sometimes larger brands miss, is the fact that every single one of their employees is a marketing device and a potential superstar. Yeah, and the companies that do get this, the companies that get behind their CTOs and everyone else in the company, push them to go, right, write LinkedIn articles, write white papers, go on podcasts, do all this stuff and become famous. They're the ones that do really well, by the way. And they do extremely well. And so do the individuals. And I understand that the individual then might leave and go somewhere else, but they might leave and go somewhere else anyway. Yeah. So yeah, I would think, yeah, it costs a bit more, but if you can start talking about your people much more than you talk about your brand and your product, then yeah, that's the thing. Happy employees make a happy company, make a productive company. If your employees are engaged and happy, you think it's like 21%, your productivity goes up about 21%. 34% of people leave a company because they don't like the culture and they don't feel supported. Now that's 34%. Now you know all these stats as well, of course you do. But that's huge. It's a huge amount of churn. It's a massive waste of human potential. The next bit after COVID, we will not be able to do that. We will not be able to waste human potential because the market will be too aggressive to allow it. And that creates a revolutionary concept where people cannot waste their time and their money and their energy by having the wrong people on the bus and not allowing them to become who they really are. You have to help people self-actualize in their role. And some companies, in fact, we've been on podcast, James, with these folk, and you can tell that they're behind that, but not only they're behind it and the companies are living that, but their companies are getting bigger and bigger because of it, because that's an exciting place to work. That's a great place to work. And they also know, hey, that guy's not going to stay with us for more than 2 years. Well, that's cool. We're still going to make him, I almost said the word rock star. I'm so sorry. We're going to make them, we're going to make them famous before they go. In fact, I think the gentleman, was it from Broadbean? We were on a podcast. James, can you remember? But it go anyway. I think you popped in and popped out of it, but I think it was with Liz as well. Yeah. And I think it was a chap from Broadbean, but my apologies if it isn't. Who was very, very wise, and he used to be, now starting a new company, I think.
Oh, that would be my friend and friend of the podcast, Darren from Pager.
That's the one. That's the fellow. Lovely chap as well. And what he thinks around culture is exactly right. Not only for tech startups, not only for recruiters, but pretty much for it all. If you can make your people famous and they become better and they leave you better than they were when they started with you, that is actually design. That's the point of life, not just the point of starting a business or growing a business.
And that kind of brings me on to my next question. Is around what kind of larger businesses can learn from startups. How to be agile, how to drive that kind of company culture, how to keep that focus on the things that are really important to a modern startup, because they know they're important, because they've lived it, and how you maintain that as you grow.
Yeah, and I think that is the $64 billion question, isn't it? It's certainly around the kind of the intrapreneur and the entrepreneur, and then the idea of innovation, and do you stifle innovation when you get bigger? And there's lots of clever psychologies around. And I think one of the key things to remember is that you've got to have a desire to change. Yeah. If you're in an incumbent business, but you don't have a desire to change because you don't get the right people, that change is impossible. So if you've got and you'll know, by the way, when you do all your tests, but you'll know the sticky middle management that are still there, and they are blockers to lots of stuff, and they're gatekeepers to lots of stuff, especially around innovation and change. I mean, goodness, we'll start talking about remote work soon, but back in the day, like a year ago, 34% of companies wouldn't allow remote work at all. 34%, I think it's 31 actually. 31% of companies wouldn't allow remote work at all. They had no policy for it. Yeah? Then everyone's suddenly forced into the remote work world. Now, that creates change, and that's why it's been so painful for a lot of people. Not only obviously the situation that we're in, which is intrinsically painful, so we cannot say that we're working from home. We're working from home under a pandemic, under that stress. Very different. Hopefully when we all come out of this next year, whenever that is, we will see that actually all the changes that we thought weren't possible are possible. They are possible. It's just literally, it's in your head. It's in your head, or it's in someone else's head that's not possible. I'll give you a really good example, James, on the marketing front. Disney Plus. Yeah, or Disney, the least, I mean, if you can't, honestly, everyone will call Disney Plus, go and sign up for it. It's awesome. Don't have to do that. But the digital transformation of that massive global brand, which was not anything to do with digital, was it really? It wasn't really a digital company. Fairgrounds and all this other kind of stuff. Don't get me wrong, I don't know Disney off by heart, but we knew of them before and they weren't great at digital. Now, absolutely smashed it. Now, other people could have done similarly. They could have done something. Don't get me wrong. Disney's a massive brand, so we already know. Put your stuff there. But they must have got the right people on the bus. They must have had something right about their culture. They must have brought in innovatives and risk takers, and they were happy to break stuff. They must have, otherwise those changes would never have happened. And that's one of the big reasons why there's 7 pillars of change. I won't get into it too deeply, but that's how you work as a startup. You have to look at those pillars and go, okay, what have we got? Well, if we're missing out the resources, everyone gets frustrated. So we've got to give it more resources. What's the vision plan? What's the other one? What's the other thing? All these different things. What's the action? All these things. There's 7 of them. Have a look on. I'll ping you. I'll send the link to the graphic. It's quite a famous graphic. But you need all those there, and then you need to have a culture which wants to change. And so the proposition that we talk about in Flock quite a lot is that that's quite hard to. It's quite an egotistical presumption to say you should change now. You know what I mean? So if you're going to someone and say, what are your values? And they're like, oh, I really value teamwork. You go, oh, well, sorry, we've got to be about autonomy now. That's quite, it's easier to get new people in. It's easier, that's the thing. And the churn rate that happens in companies is usually because people's values don't align with the company they're in, or they have a terrible boss, or that's a bit of both most of the time. Yeah, I got to be careful with the word terrible, but we've all had terrible bosses. In fact, Flock was created because of mine and Miguel's work experience, those experiences.
I tell you what, Dan. We're gonna kind of we're coming to the end now because we've got. My feeling is we could do this for hours basically, and I want you back on basically at some point. We're going to follow up on this, and we're going to do this again. But before I let you go, give us a little bit of an insight into Flock and why it was created in the first place.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, just say with me and Michael and some other folk, I'd actually thought about building Flock about 7 or 8 years ago, and I was far too early in the marketplace. I had an augmented reality company like 10 years ago, and we talked about it before about the waves. It was hype circle time, and you have to have huge amounts of cash to go through that trust or disillusionment and come out the other side. We just didn't have huge amounts of cash, so we had to benchmark it, put it into park it to one side. Then I met with Michael, and we were both talking about having culturally bad moments where we work for companies and won't talk about those companies, and you could tell they had quite a toxic culture. And he basically just done his thesis and all the other stuff around it and based it on this work from Stanford. And I was fascinated because I just get fascinated by cool stuff. And I was like, wow, that's awesome. If we could create something from that could really help startups. And so we'd originally done it to help smaller companies, not bigger companies. But then much larger companies loved it because you could culture map the whole company. You could say, oh, this is where the problem point might be. This is where another problem point might be. But the most important thing about your Flock is it gives you, or that time it gave and still does now, it gives you the language you can all use so you can have that first conversation. And that was Flock from about 2 years ago. Now, because of the conversations and collaborations we're working with, in fact, Liz is one of the people who came on your podcast, I think, last week, is one of those people as well from the learning and development people. They've loved it and they've realized that we can create activities that are aligned to your values, which can help you whilst you're remote working. And that proposition of we find out your values, give you activities to help you with your values whilst remote working, that has now made us the award-winning company that we are now, because people have got behind that. And of course, we're very lucky because we sat in a pool of people, tiny river, and then all of a sudden it got 5 times bigger. More and more people now need remote work. And that's what we're really about. We're about helping people whilst they're remote working really become better people and teams to become better. Because as I say, this next leap that we'll have in 2021, that's going to need your team to be really cohesive, really tight. And that doesn't mean culturally the same people. Yeah, Flock helps with diversity and inclusion because it talks about values, not about cultures, but about values. So diversity and inclusion is the other big thing for,
mate,
for 2021.
Trust me, there's rabbit holes there we could go down for hours and hours and hours. Mate, it's been an absolute pleasure. We will definitely have you back on. We're going to kind of follow up on all the points that we've discussed, because we didn't get around to a few of them that I wanted to kind of touch on. We didn't even touch on, as I said, inclusion and diversity, and kind of even get into specifics about AI and technology. And we will do next time, I promise. We'll do that sometime in the new year. But for now, thank you very much, Dan. It's been a pleasure having you on.
Oh, thanks, James. It's been wonderful. And Merry Christmas to everyone, depending where you listen to it, and a Happy New Year. And I'll see you next year, mate.
Cheers.